Welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here with someone we can truly call a regular here at the summit, and it is the one and only Eghosa Omoigui, the managing director at EchoVC, and most importantly, a great dad. I actually remember having you on stage at the very first editions in back in Lagos even. And on a personal note, I truly admire your especially your drive to inspire the new generation of investors here in Africa by being so open and the willingness to share all your lessons learned along the journey, the good, but especially also the bad. So for today, I'm very much looking forward to a forward-looking conversation, how you've seen things change over the course of a career investing in African ventures, and how you've seen the industry developing now and, of course, into the future. But before we dive into that, how was actually your masterclass early this morning?
So thank you so much for the super kind intro. I'm not sure I deserved all of that, but I really appreciate it. Grateful and glad to be, back here, share, on I believe it's now my third edition of talking to fund managers and aspiring fund managers. And, what's great about that is, I get an extra, I always get an additional year of experience and learnings to be able to share. I think overall, hopefully the lessons imparted to them, become lessons that they eventually can eventually make them very successful, which, for me personally would be the objective.
Yeah, the numbers are definitely growing. And but especially when you first entered the space, I mean, there was hardly anyone willing or even able to manage an Africa-focused fund. In your view, how has the situation changed? Is it still the same, or are we making any progress?
So if I looked at, if I sort of looked at this from a then versus now perspective, very significant progress has been made on a lot of fronts. So when we started, fundraising, this was sort of 2012 for an Africa-focused fund. It was a crazy idea. It made no sense to many people, and so if you sort of catapult yourself from that point to now, right? It's a no-brainer. I think we're certainly at a point of no-brainer now. One of the other things that sort of has changed is that on many vectors, we now have an increasing number of existing and would-be entrepreneurs. We have an increasing number of large infrastructure, global large infrastructure players that are, now active on the continent. We still have, I think, some challenges around the academically fueled, traditional academia fueled pipelining. So there's still that, but all signals, I think, are directionally positive. And, of course, the most important thing is the dollars being allocated to Africa-focused, tech. That's been such a dramatic rise.
Yeah, you are now mentioning the dollar. What makes being a GP in Africa different from, say, managing a fund elsewhere in the world, US, Europe, even Asia?
So there are many things, I think, but at the end of the day, what for you to be in the game, in other words, to actually be a GP, you've got to be able to raise money. So you end up where, in Africa, there are a lot of undersized funds. And when you sort of start deploying capital, you sort of learn exactly what an undersized fund looks like. But that's been the challenge. And so undersized funds, we're funding undersized companies and underpowered companies. And so there's this run-on consequence.
What are then the skills you need to have to make that successful?
Well, so I'll give you sort of a stat that I heard and I have shared, which is that a typical frontier markets emerging fund manager spends 42 months fundraising. So you've got this sort of consequential problem where it takes you 3.5 years to fundraise. It probably takes you another 6 months to sort of settle down. So you're 4 years in just before you can start deploying capital, right? So before you can now start going back out, to raise more capitals another 4 years. That's, you're pretty much 80% of a fund cycle at that point. So it's a little bit rough. And so what does that mean? It means that for a lot of folks, they've had to go raise money, not from institutional investors, but from high net worth individuals and the like. And so the good thing is that, when we first started, going back to your initial question about what has changed, the high net worth individuals, absolutely dismissed technology as a force for real economic empowerment and value creation. That's no longer the case, right? The technology genie is out of the bottle, the startup genie is out of the bottle, and so there are more and more of these high net worth individuals who are willing to sort of deploy capital to more and more managers or angel syndicates or the like to be able to invest in these startups. So that's a fantastic thing.
What actually made you decide to not quit?
Yeah, so it's, I think, a few things. One is I don't know how to do anything else. Right? This is the thing I know how to do, and I love this more than anything else. And so much so I would do it for free. So when I get up in the morning to do this, I'm not doing this for the money or the fame or the glory. It is about being an active participant in the building of true long-term companies and value. But in doing so, I don't like to sugarcoat what the process has been, right? It's been brutal. Now, there will be a time when people are going to see the results of all our work, and there will be very significant results. But I don't want anyone to ever say they truly never saw the path that got to those results, because it's been hard. You are out there, and as well as I talked about earlier on about being entrepreneurs, we're entrepreneurs. Have we as a firm gotten to 3 weeks of cash, 4 weeks of cash? Absolutely. Have there been days when I don't want to get up? Absolutely. Have there been days where I got kicked so badly I lost my breath? I got punched so badly I lost my breath. I got disappointed so badly I lost my breath. I got hurt so badly I lost my breath. Absolutely. I think there's that classic saying, sailors are only made in tempestuous seas. You can never be a great sailor sailing your nice little sailboat, on some nice windless lake or barely windless lake, right? That's not how. You don't ever become a great sailor. And so while you don't necessarily want tempestuous seas, you want to be able to have people who are resilient enough to be able to deal with them. And a lot of the paths that these managers take are rough. And so,
But it helps if you know where the wind is blowing from.
That always helps, right? That absolutely always helps. But wind changes, and wind can change its direction very quickly, right? And of course, there's also the other thing, which is you have to have a working sail to capture the wind.
Quick question on your perspective on how, especially the COVID situation, has impacted the industry in broad terms.
So I think I remember when we all sort of started to worry about COVID back in March 2020, and but I was a little bit more confident about the African entrepreneur than I was about the European or American entrepreneur, right? And the reason why was because I've always felt that African entrepreneurs tend to be more anti-fragile than their counterparts in Europe and the US. And so, I'm not going to say that, the numbers were completely predicted, but the truth of the matter is that the underlying thesis, which is the anti-fragility in comparison, turned out to be absolutely on point. African entrepreneurs were able to sort of deal with that and bounce back. In many ways, COVID did benefit us as a continent for attracting more investment dollars.
Yeah,
that wasn't necessarily true for fund managers, by the way. The fund managers, I think, had a harder time because one of the key elements of raising funds especially for the larger limited partners is, they go through what's called an ODD, operational due diligence process. And many of them had a historical underground ODD process. And that was never sort of, it didn't really change.
So there's 2 points there. So first of all, then what do you see is that impact of these larger, especially foreign investors entering the space? And then secondly, do you feel then that time to be fundraising better now, or is it still sort of like similar to a year ago, mid COVID?
So to the first question, I may have shared this before, but one very interesting factoid that on sort of on a percentage and dollar basis, international fund managers, are investing almost all the money in Africa, and then bigger than any other continent. There's real value to that because, they have a ton of dollars and they can put that in there. I think we're excited to see entrepreneurs raise this capital. But the truth is, when you look at the distribution of the capital, and we sort of can talk about this later, but when you look at the distribution of the capital, it's very, very, very concentrated, right? And, it's a handful of companies that attract, 80+% of the money. And it's literally a micro handful of sectors that attract 80% of the money, right? So while the opportunity is distributed, the money isn't. And I think to the second question, does the fundraising market change? Well, as borders start to get more and more open and the like, we're seeing some slow sunlight. There's some slow sunlight is coming in very slowly, but it's still an interesting process.
Yeah. And so a little bit more about that forward look. What do you think this space could or will look like 2 or 3 years from now?
So there are a few sort of interesting indicators around sort of investing. One is a lot of the traditional private equity folks are now trying to get into technology investing and startup investing, either raising new pools of capital or carving out existing pools of capital to do that. Early days, I've done this business, decent amount of time, and I've never seen private equity folks transition to VC successfully at any kind of scale. The second thing is, as you see more and more international managers, I think we're going to start to see more hiring of locally based individuals first, before they start to think about Africa-focused sidecars and then Africa-focused vehicles. But I do expect that within 3 years, we'll see more of those. Fintech continues to be a very important sector. It's, lots of excitement globally. But what that also, and hopefully as more and more of the traditional limited partners who already have experience in African private equity start to put more dollars to domestic VC funds, I think we'll start to see more activity outside of fintech, whether it's in healthcare or it's education or it's agriculture and food security, or even if it's in climate.
And is there any role to be played by the local pension funds?
That's an interesting question, because pension funds are I've always found them very interesting because to a large degree, they are not designed to take on inordinate risk. Right? So venture is risky. Private equity, maybe to a lesser degree. Right? And so pension funds, remember, they're there to eventually, respond to future obligations. Right? So there is a point in time where the full members of the pension fund are going to require payouts. But I do think that we all seem to be looking at the pension funds as gigantic pools of capital that could just open up a little bit and release to venture. And I don't disagree with that, but here is the biggest challenge for the pension funds. Are there enough fund vehicles? Are there enough properly sized fund vehicles for them to deploy even a decent amount of reserve capital for venture?
Have you said no to unicorn of Africa?
So I have to think about that, like where we've actually said no versus where we said yes, but we didn't have the capital. I really, it's a great question, and I'm going to have to come back to you on it because nothing comes to mind where we've said no and there's been such a big miss where we were like, ooh, I wish we knew. Because, one of the reasons we say no for a lot of different reasons, right? And, one of them is, first of all, we don't believe that there's entrepreneur product fit. We don't believe there's entrepreneur market fit. We don't think that product market fit can happen as soon as, the entrepreneur feels. But there are other reasons. For instance, we don't spend a lot, I've talked about this, but these are 10-year relationships when you write a check. And you've got, not every morning, but most mornings, you've got to want to wake up and want to work with the founders and the company. And there have been founders that we're like, no, we're not interested in doing that. And we probably will never be interested in doing that. And some of them have gone on to do really, really well. And I have never lost a minute of sleep in passing on those.
Any final messages to the investor audience out there? What are you really most excited about for the coming 12 months, or maybe even any exciting new initiative from your side?
So I think to my fellow managers, and I don't want to trivialize this, but we're entrepreneurs as well, right? We're no different. We're out there raising money the same way entrepreneurs do. We're out there getting rejections the same way entrepreneurs do. But the truth is, don't sell your soul. Find your tribe, right? There's going to be one investor who will believe in you. And it's super important that you don't breach your own sense of integrity. You don't lose your sense of self. You don't end up sort of trying to cut corners and all that good stuff. There's no reason for that, right? And, and be careful, I think, of where you find your funds, because these are the trades you're going to make that in a few years, when you're sort of on a trajectory and you're thinking, oh, look, I've done so well, something comes back to bite you. Just be yourself, be who you are, and, and do the very best that you can.
Thank you, Eghosa. You are leading by example by being in the industry for such a long time. I mean, this should be an inspiration to all the newcomers, that this isn't a one-year thing. So also a shout out to the audience here. If you have any questions, use the chat. Also make use of the different options, not only to listen in, but also to network with fellow investors in the Network Lounge. And again, a big thanks for Eghosa joining us today for this fireside chat. And then all I can say is cheers to the bad days, but even more to the good days. Thanks again, Eghosa.
Thank you.